Okay, so we're going to kick off with respect to the people that are here live. If you're watching this or listening to this on the recording, then welcome also. If you have any questions from today, we'll give you a place to reach all of us at the end of the session. But for those who are actually in the session live, we will come back to the room about 45 minutes in. We can take any questions in complete confidence of the room with my guests today. So welcome to Balancing Acts. These are a free to access initiative from my business, Forging People. And we're talking about effective communication with diverse audiences. We do things very different here at Forging People. It's a very human experience, very conversational, very informal. So it's kind of like a three-way chat, which we're going to expand to the people in the live audience as well. We do lots of different things at Forging People, all around learning and development, but this will be in a handout. I'm not going to go into this for the sake of your sanity and my time. You got all of this on the handout, so please do look that up afterwards. So we do work in lots of different organizations, lots of different spaces. So wherever you're coming from here today, we cover this frontline work through the Ministry of Defence and Emergency Services. We work with organisations and people leaders, do a lot of media work personally, so BBC, ITV and Sky here in the UK and Europe. In the US and Canada, I work with NBC, delivering that lived experience angle alongside solution-focused professionals as I have on board today. But my greatest joy today is host and creator of KFC TV. I'm 6'4", 24 stone, hosting a fried chicken TV station. I trained all my life for that gig. That may become relevant today, that may be not. If you want to know about that, let me know afterwards. But my own career comes from, weirdly, mental illness. I developed mental illness in my childhood, namely obsessive compulsive disorder. As I got older in life, it morphed into something called generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD. And my career as a speaker has been built on sharing lived experiences. For me, lived experience is the perfect vehicle to drive engagement to the solutions and the insights and the help that people need, but it's not the solution. So what I wanted to do with these sessions is to bring people information and insights and tools and specialists that you wouldn't usually get access to for free to complement my lived experience insights. And I will act as host today for my guests. And I have some amazing guests for you today. Dr. Alex Blower. Alex, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Alex Blower. I'm currently a researcher working down at Arch University Bournemouth in the sunny south, but I'm also founder of a national network of educators called Boys Impact. As a young person, I experienced a bit of a bumpy road educationally. I had significant challenges with my own mental health, experienced exclusion from school, and some of the widest gaps educationally that we've got in this country are between young men who are eligible for free school meals and those that are not. As we're all aware of, there is also loads of issues in school surrounding the influences of ninnies like Andrew Tate and the manosphere, and it's an incredibly turbulent time to be a young man growing up in the world that we do. So all of the academic research that I conduct, all of the work that I do with young people and the public speaking that I engage into a wide range of different audiences is geared towards my own personal mission towards doing something about that and creating more equitable educational ecosystems.
Brilliant, fantastic, Alex, and real pleasure to have you here. And Sarah Hunt, big fan of Sarah, all the way from Canada. Sarah Hunt, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Hello, thanks so much for having me, Nick. So I have been in the health and wellness industry for the last 15 years, and I don't do traditional yoga classes any longer. That's how I started. I used to do yoga and holistic nutrition, but my favorite target market is people who would never normally do yoga or wellness. So what I do predominantly now, I've kind of moved more into conferences and larger events. And I work with people and basically help to give people more focus, more energy, more vitality during these big, long conferences that are very draining. So I come into the stage throughout the conference, almost like an MC, but a more movement-based MC. And I'll get people to just move in their chairs, do some deep breathing, do some mindset work to help basically make them have a better conference. But then when they leave the conference, they leave feeling really good, and they can take that basically like a holistic toolkit, take it back into their lives. Essentially, overall, I want people to experience more joy in their lives, and we can access that through our body.
Love that. Thank you very much. This eclectic mix may seem a bit odd on the surface in the nicest possible way. However, there's a genius behind my madness, probably. The reason I thought of Alex and Sarah straight away is because actually the audiences that we all engage with. So myself, from a mental health perspective, and the work that I do as a professional speaker, also as a speaking coach, I see this in other people as well. But with Sarah, she's engaging people to do things which are uncomfortable to a lot of people. And again, in a very physical way, a very emotional way. And with Alex, again, engaging, we've used this word fizzy with young boys, especially, engaging with young boys and educators on the opposite side of the scale as well. There's a real art in how the speaker engages with their audience. So I wanted to examine the kind of the diversity of engagement that we all use, and hopefully give you some things that you may not have considered when you're looking to engage your own audiences and deal with people around you as well, personally and professionally, because I'm sure there's going to be something in this for all of us. One of the things that I kind of really learned from my own experiences of engaging people on mental health, for example, as somebody who isn't solution focused. So I'm not a coach, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a guru. You wouldn't want that in your life, trust me. I'm far too empathic for that, just agree with everybody. But what I found was the people that really wanted to be in the room were on the back row. The people that really wanted to engage in the stuff that I had to bring were in the back row. So as I got bigger and kind of more visible and the stages got bigger, I actually had to ask organizers for walkways down the middle, because I knew my audience were going to be in the back row. They were going to be the people that wanted to be in the room, but not too close that they feel they're going to get picked on, to raise that anxiety level. And especially in education, Alex, as well, I'm sure you'll understand. It's, for me, knowing your audience is crucial as much as we can. And we'll talk about actually when you're up there later on. But how important is it for both of you to know your audience? And Sarah, if we can start with you, as I said, if you're going into a corporate conference, which is very much kind of your remit, how do you engage that kind of the suited, booted, traditional kind of people that don't want to engage in the stuff that you're bringing to them? How do you actually get them round to that?
I have had to become quite bossy. And I'm like you, Nick, I'm naturally quite empathetic, and I don't like making people feel uncomfortable. So I will never in any of my sessions say, and it's fine if other people do this, but I never say things like stand up and talk to the person beside you or get in a group of three and tell them your worst experience. It's all within themselves. And once people realize that I will never going to make them come onto the stage or raise their hand or talk to somebody beside them, I think makes them feel quite comfortable. So what I will do is go onto the stage and, like I said, kind of take over. I had to create this style of myself. Is okay, if you don't mind, maybe close your eyes or stretch your arms. I just come on the stage now and say, close your eyes. And then with a little bit of soft music, people can be lured in quite quickly. And that's actually my favorite target market, is people who have never done yoga or wellness, like I said, because 10 seconds of closing your eyes is going to bring you into a state with deep breathing. Just sitting up tall, you'll completely have a shift when you come out of it 10 seconds later. So that's what I do basically. I don't make it optional. Anytime companies say to me, we'd like to have you in the morning before the conference starts, and right away I'll say, is it optional? I'll say, yeah, we can't make them. And I mean, obviously I'll still go in if that's what they want, but usually what happens in a conference of 500 people, 10 people show up, and there are people who would do it anyway. Yeah. So I really want to get at those people, because again, it elevates you. It brings you into the state of joy when you do it. And I'm not getting you to, do a handstand on the chair. It's just something like, lifting your arms and closing your eyes. So yeah, and then afterwards, what happens when people open up their eyes, you see this sense of transformation. And sometimes after 20 seconds, people will come up to me after and say, what just happened? They've had this shift.
I love that, because they're not challenging what you're asking them to do. They're challenging their perspective of, for example, well-being or self-care. It's kind of like you have to win over their minds first before you get them to do the action, like a trust and rapport kind of thing. Is that right?
That's exactly right. It's just one of those things, like you'll see the benefit. I could just stand all day and tell them the benefits of meditation or, chair yoga, whatever it is, but they're not going to listen. But get them to experience themselves, and they'll see right away, and then they're sold.
Love that. Thank you. And Alex, I mean, I do have this throwaway line, which can be quite true, that the work that I do in prisons is a lot easier than the work I do in schools, which is kind of true a lot of the time. I've seen people do it badly. I must admit, I have seen people, and not yourself, I like to add, I've seen educators do this badly, where I treat it like a herding cats kind of methodology of you shout louder. We're looking at the student generation, maybe young boys to start with. How do you engage and captivate young boys the way that you did when I've seen you recently talk at the conference down south?
Yeah, I think there is an important part of learning that takes place that has to be your ownership and the perception that you take into the space. If I see what I do as a privilege. The fact that I get to speak to these young men in those settings is a real privilege. The fact that they are giving me their time when, like you were saying, down south when we were there, we had 160 out of Dorset's busiest young men all in one lecture theatre. The fact that they were actively engaging with me in that space is a privilege that I can't articulate the value of. A lot of the young people that I engage with might be from families who have had multiple generations of negative experiences in education, families where the site where learning takes place formally has always been one that's threat. It's risk to their emotional well-being, threat to their mental health, threat to their physical well-being as well sometimes. And if I go into these spaces with an assumption that I am aligned to an educator or a formal teacher, what I'm carrying in with me into that space is a perception from the young people that I am characteristic of all of those things that they don't trust. So for me, authenticity is really important, and working to earn trust and working to cultivate conditions where they see me as somebody with a legitimate message to say. I think one of the things that maybe we've kind of jumped forward a little bit in this conversation, but I'd also say around the audience, and specifically, if we've got an audience that might be characterized by a demographic who we wouldn't usually engage with, or who we've got very little kind of in terms of connection, and in terms of that connection, that kind of value to add to the space, then critically reflecting on that value that we're bringing in, on that legitimacy our voice holds within that space, is really important. And perhaps as a community of people that do speak publicly, a critical reflection at that point of, is there anybody who I could platform who might be better positioned to hold that room and that audience and build that rapport and connection than I am? Because, over my experience speaking, I've been in numerous contexts where I've thought, actually, I'm not the right person for this or to do this. Often realizing that fact when it's a little bit too late.
Yeah. But I think you're right. Certainly the commonality, like the demographic was something certainly that is important to kind of mention. And I guess particularly in your space with things like neurodiversity and culture and race and hugely diverse audiences that you had at your events or the events that I've been to with you. But even without the lack of commonality, you still managed to find connection for the reasons you've already mentioned. I guess on the flip side of things, what I wanted to ask you, Alex, is if you're speaking to your peers, if you're speaking to fellow doctorates, lecturers, how does that feel when you have a different, your perspective is the same, your experiences are the same, but the audience receiving them is going to be very different, potentially critical, because everyone has different theories, very subjective experiences. How do you deal with that?
Absolutely. Interestingly, one of the sessions that I deliver as a bit of a CPD to new practitioners in widening participation, I deliver as an incredibly similar session to year 10 students in school. I think a lot of the time we don't necessarily afford, the young people with the trust in their own abilities to kind of critically engage with the information, or to understand concepts or principles that we might write off as too complex. But it is very, very different. it's a winning hearts and minds kind of job in a completely different way. If I'm speaking at a large conference, often I've got a purpose in mind, and that purpose is in mind is I want to inspire people, I want to motivate people, and I want to state the message very, very clearly that the work that we are undertaking in masculinity and education is aligned to tackling patriarchal societal structures and promoting a more fair, equitable society for us all to live in, you know, with men going into adulthoods that are characterized by healthy relationships and good mental health, and all of the rest of those things. And within that, then quite rightly, there are criticisms. There are people who say, well, actually, if you're not applying those resources to young women, then how can you say you are doing those things? And the answers to that are quite complex. They're based in sociological kind of understanding that I've developed through my doctoral research, and distilling that into a message that people can take home using an analogy or a metaphor is something that can be really, really powerful. In academic audiences, it flips on its head again, because they want you to parrot a sentence that's about 2 pages long, you know, and draw on several sociological philosophers to answer those said questions. And the ability to be flexible within those different locations in terms of, I guess, your register and the words coming out of your mouth is very important, but it's always underpinned by the same passion and enthusiasm and commitment to the work that I do, rather if I'm speaking about an academic study or I'm speaking to a conference full of practitioners or a group of young men, that approach and that core why that I take into that space doesn't change. It's just the message adapts slightly.
Thanks, Alex. And you've both kind of covered a lot of this in the first question, because I love going down rabbit holes and I can't stop myself sometimes, especially with interesting guests such as yourselves. But how do you actually craft messages to win over the hearts and minds of an audience? And again, from the same perspective of Alex, you've kind of alluded to how you do this already, but how do you see your kind of content? Do you see it through the eyes of the audience, like to see what the value that you would bring them, or is it to break down a message in a way that will be received by them well? And Sarah, if we can start with you actually, in terms of if you're trying to convince people of the benefits of what you're doing and why it's great to do this stuff, how do you win over hearts and minds in a predominantly corporate space a lot of the time?
Well, overall, along the lines of what Alex was saying, the message doesn't change. I want people to feel better with themselves, but unfortunately, you have to, in order to convince the corporate world or the schools or whoever you're getting hired to work for, you have to sell the benefits to them, you know, like higher productivity, more revenue, essentially, you know, for the corporate world. But I, like, again, just what Alex was saying, if I'm speaking to younger kids or a corporate world, or, you know, people just leaving university, or people, you know, about to go into the workforce, whatever it is, or, you know, C-suite people, it's all the same. We all think we're so different, and we're all actually really similar. And I don't know if you remember that movie from the 90s. I just thought of it right now, called Pay It Forward, where, you know, if you do one nice thing to someone, that is going to like light them up on the inside out. And I always, you know, that now one time a couple of years ago, my phone ran out of battery when I was doing the checkout. You know, it was just this big checkout. This person at the Tesco was just zooming through, and I said, "Oh, sorry, you're gonna have to talk to me," because I had my batteries. And I said, "Oh, thank you so much," because nobody speaks anymore. Everybody's just looking down. Nobody looks up. And on a physiological level, when you look down, it starts to bring energy down. You know, it pulls you down. Okay. When you think of somebody who's just not feeling great, you're kind of walking around like this. So it's so important to look up and lift up. But along the lines of what what we were saying, does the message change? No, essentially, because we live our lives in a more of a place of joy when we're feeling better within ourselves. You know, we all think once we get the dream job, the perfect partner, more money, then I'll feel better. You know, that outside in theory. And then it's like, no, we have to feel that way first. You know, you build it up within yourself. And my techniques are body, breath, brain, just to make it easy. I like saying mindset better than brain, but it just flows better, body, breath, brain. So, you know, any unwanted state we're in, whether you're whatever age you're in, whatever job you have, you can change it in a split second by changing the way you move your body and changing the way you breathe, essentially. Because, you know, when we're anxious, we're all humans, you know, we kind of breathe like this. It's like that top percentage. So if you just go, well, let's try it all right now. Sit up tall and close your eyes and just take 2 deep breaths. Take an inhale and then a big sigh. And then again, one more inhale and exhale. And then open up your eyes. And what was that, 5 seconds? And you just feel better right away. So nothing changes really, but how I talk to people, because I always have people saying, okay, we want to hire you, but, you know, why do we need it? we want to tick the wellness box. It's like, okay, then I have to go into, you know, people will feel more confident to negotiate more at conferences, to do, you know, to have these, to network, whatever it is, whatever they need to do. But essentially it's to make ourselves feel better. Because, you know, just because you have all the things ticked off, it doesn't mean that you feel good. A lot of people who have a lot of money are also angry, stressed, worried all the time. So it's all about what quality of emotion do you want to have on a regular basis. That's always what I want to say. Like, if you could be one word all day, what would it be? I did this recently at a festival. People had all these kind of almost like little twinkly pen things that you could see. And I wouldn't ask them what it was, but sometimes I look and everybody mostly said happy. If you could be one word for the rest of your life. And then they close their eyes and just kind of write it out. And, you know, we have to focus on that. We just get so set on targets and goals and kind of the stuff that, you know, when you're on your deathbed, does that matter? It's like, how did you feel on a regular basis? Because that's the quality of your life.
I love that. I think you've uncovered something really important there when it comes to messages as well. It's not about us. And I take very much the same approach as you guys, is that the content remains the same, maybe more age appropriate depending on the audience for my world. But actually it's about the receiver and where they are as opposed to how they receive your message. And Alex, anything to throw into the mix on that one?
Yeah, I love that body, breast, brain thing. I think one of the things I was going to mention was accessibility, and that's absolutely that, you know, and creating that hook in. I always think, why do the people, or why should the people in front of me care about what I've got to say? You know, and when I consider why they should care about what I've got to say, I can then think about those key things that will be those hooks of their interest that will pull them into active engagement with whatever it is that I'm presenting, and leveraging those, because if someone cares about it and they're interested in what you're saying, you're probably going to have a really good time speaking with them. So, you know, and doing it in a way that maintains that engagement, I think, across a 45-minute presentation that you might have, or, you know, perhaps a slightly longer stint on a stage where they're being quiet and listening than perhaps they would otherwise be used to, is really important.
Absolutely. So I'm a huge office nerd. The US office, controversial. US office better than the UK office, from my opinion. I know that's hugely controversial. However, if you ever get a chance to see the public speaking episode of the US office with Dwight Schrute here, it's an amazing thing about how he gets taught all the wrong things on how to be a public speaker. It's an amazing thing. Anyway, the point is very often you'll see, when we're looking to build that kind of credibility and trust from us as a speaker, you can see eloquent speakers, fantastic speakers, and but absolutely disingenuous. They'll give a very good presentation and then say, run to the back of the room, now is only £10,000. It kind of loses all kind of element. It feels like the scripted sales school, for example. How do you build trust and credibility through your work to reach your diverse audiences? Certainly, I think commonality, as you mentioned, community, kind of giving people the context of why you're there, and giving them that upfront agreement and telling them who you are, as we did earlier on, to build credibility. What else do you do to make sure that you can build a relationship with your audiences as soon as you can? And whoever wants to go first, I'm happy with whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to take that one first if you want to think. Oh, sorry, Sarah.
Go.
For me, authenticity is huge. I have spent a long time, I think, over the last 36 years of being alive, developing my own life emotions into something where I wake up and feel that I'm working every day towards somebody that I want to be proud of, or that I can be proud of. And the challenges that I've experienced along the way have been fairly significant at times, especially when I was younger, and have absolutely contributed to me arriving where I am at the moment. And for me, bringing all of that in is important. Speaking about the things perhaps that are a little bit challenging for me to speak about, let alone publicly, especially if I know there's even going to be a hint of resonance with some challenges that might be facing those people that I'm engaging with. When it comes back to the why you should care question as well, there is a feeling amongst some educators when I chat to them, oh, well, we can't tell that these young people that they experience educational inequality because we don't want them to feel like they're being targeted because they experience educational inequality. Those young people know that they face challenges. It's not news to them that those experiences are ones that they lived, and actually it can be really empowering fronting up with that and saying it's not fair, it's not right. If you feel angry about this, you absolutely should be feeling angry about this. We want to do something about it, and we want to support you to make a change, not in your own lives necessarily, but in the whole education system. Are you going to come with us on that journey? And that kind of authenticity as well with the message, and like you were saying, Nick, being very upfront and clear as to why you are in that space.
Yeah, and I think that's such a crucial part of it. But the vulnerability it takes to lay out your personal experiences, for example, can be quite daunting to a lot of people. But as we both know, we know each other well enough by now, Alex, but it's the perfect vehicle to kind of build that connection a lot faster, a lot deeper, a lot stronger, a lot faster than any superficial messaging will ever deliver. So I guess it's how much of you are you prepared to share? Because I do believe that lived experience is a fantastic piece to throw into the presentations and the messages that you're delivering. Sarah, I know you also incorporate personal experiences in what you do and your why in that sense. Do you want to share how you build trust and credibility with people?
Yeah, well, but I'm glad that you went first, Alex, because I was going to answer differently. So I'll answer in the way that I was going to before I heard yours, but then I'm going to go into a little bit about the wellness world. So I there's not like a one size fits all for any sort of conference. So people usually always hire me for a morning energizer. But as we know, like our phone drains the battery drains throughout the day. We need continual top ups. So what I have now is a conference wellness menu, and I'll work with the organizer to say, okay, I'll look at the schedule and say, oh gosh, you have 5 back-to-back power presentations. People are going to fade, they're going to be slumping over in their seat. So I will, my sessions are anywhere between 2 to 10 minutes, the little mini ones, so that they can't say there's not enough time in the conference schedule. So after a coffee break, for example, they come back and everything's up in the air, everybody's chatting, and the poor keynote speakers, hello, nobody's listening. So my sessions will kind of slot in right before that to go, again, read the room, and I'll kind of, it's always accessible. It's always stuff they can do in chairs, or just, just come into the room, close your eyes. And that's how I work around those things. So I'll adapt and modify based on how I see. Sometimes people are really energized if I have something planned, session 3 of the day of mine, they're going one way, I'll pull out something else. So that's a way that I adapt and modify and gain credibility that way. So they think, oh, it's not this cookie cutter thing where, well, I said I was going to do this at 10, therefore I'm going to do it. Or a lot of the times, conferences and corporate scenes are an idea of health. People are severely introverted and neurodivergent. So we can't just assume that everybody loves it. Like, I'm quite introverted, and after a conference, I'm just drained, and I don't want to talk to anybody else with a lanyard or, ask what they're, you can just feel that kind of selling thing happening all the time. So yeah, that's my answer to that, kind of creating different sessions to fit people's needs. So not just saying this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to work with the crowd, with energy. But after Alex went and talked to and spoke about his thing, what I kind of wanted to mention was the wellness world in general. I didn't really fit in with, and it's one of those things, kind of like the school kids. I felt like I was pretending and faking. And I don't think they're public anymore, but there's some yoga videos 15 years ago when I first put them up on YouTube. And I just look at myself and laugh because I was trying to be this person who was, okay, everybody find your center. No, find it. And it just felt really fake because I moved from the corporate world into yoga, and I did the class once, just loved it because I used to do dance when I was younger, just in a fun way. And then when I was in the class, I loved it. Something about the formula of the movement and the stillness at the end. The shift always happens. But when I became a yoga teacher, again, I had to fit into this world. I felt like I had to fit into this world, this holier than thou. You walk into the yoga studio with the waterfall and the Zen music, and I would feel slightly guilty. I was up too late the night before having, pizza and wine or something. And people would say, "Oh, you're come in with the coffee. You have coffee, you drink caffeine, you're a yoga teacher." And I was like, "Oh gosh." Yeah. And so I would often get in, not in trouble, but I would get called up to the office by the studio managers and say, "We heard you were playing the Bee Gees in class." And Nick, what I do, so I created disco yoga, which is another side thing. And because I don't want wellness to be this thing where you think, because everybody needs to feel better. We're all walking around, we're anxious, we're stressed, we're overwhelmed. The inner critic is really loud in all of us, no matter what we do. And so with the disco yoga, it's like, okay, we can have fun, have mass dance parties, jump around, and then be still. So it kind of it pulls people in and go, it doesn't just have to be this way. And then people always say, "I never would have done yoga if I didn't do this. My friend pulled me in at a festival," or whatever it was. It's like coming at it whatever different way, whatever you do to get people there, it doesn't matter. And that's why with the corporate and the conference stuff, it's like these are people who would never normally sign up to a class. But when you sit there and when you move your shoulders and maybe take a deeper breath and switch your mind state to something that feels good, you're going to feel better. And so that's why that's the credibility.
Thanks, Sarah. That's great. Love that. So I want to talk about active listening and feedback. I want to throw something else into the mix following the way that this conversation is going as well. If we're looking at incorporating more of ourselves into our presentations and our talks and our messages, actually bringing in more of our potential experiences, for example, there's something that back in my drinking days we called the beer fear, so I don't drink anymore. When you wake up thinking, "Oh, I didn't say that, did I?" Very often when people show more of themselves, they automatically feel that sensitivity, that hypersensitivity of that kind of feeling. So I guess lumping this in with, how important has it been for both of you to develop your active listening skills and to evolve what you do through the feedback of your audiences? And have you ever experienced that kind of sensitivity where you feel that you question something that you said, maybe? And again, whoever wants to pick this up first, who's ever ready.
I'll go first this time. Well, yeah, I sometimes work with people. I did a conference last year, and everybody was there I can't remember exactly what it was. They had all been physically or sexually abused. And so in my sessions are often close your eyes so that they just get out of the room and into their body. And right away, I thought, oh, that's probably not necessarily a good thing, because sometimes closing your eyes if you have a lot of trauma just doesn't really work, like moving into your body. So adapting in those situations. I remember it was about a minute before I went on stage and they hadn't briefed me properly. Everybody in this room is a survivor. They're working to change it. So then, switching on the spot to go, okay, I'm going to get you all to optionally close your eyes, but what is another great option is just to stare down to the floor at one point. And sometimes as well, I can see when my eyes are open, if I'm saying close your, so that's that one, let's park that example. So that's how I switch quite quickly. And sometimes these things are in the moment, you just have to go, oh. But then when you are looking around the room, if I'm doing like a guided relaxation, sometimes you will see people naturally getting a little bit teary. That happens in normal yoga, the moving around and then being still, just their emotions rising. We eat our emotions, we drink our emotions, we gamble, whatever it is. And we get really busy, and that blocks our emotions. And it's often people who come up to me after, but I read the room enough to go, okay, everyone's just having a little gentle water under the eyeball kind of thing, but it's nice. But if I would never do it too long, to the fact that it's uncomfortable, and the odd time people come up to me and say, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a really powerful point, that actually it's a great way to safeguard from the front of the room So very often I'll use things like eye contact as a way to safeguard my audience. If I'm talking about something which, at the worst, is potentially triggering for somebody, it's a great way to actually kind of be in the moment and actually actively listening to your room right now, using things like eye contact. That's a really important point. When I run Find Your Voice Live, which is my whole day public speaking coaching thing, the 3 events that we do in the morning are all emotionally led exercises. Come to the front of the room, talk about something that makes you angry, something that makes you sad. And it's the reason why my rooms are safeguarded. I have a counsellor and a coach on site to make sure the room's protected. So I think that's a really important point you make, that your words have power and ultimate power as well. So to be mindful of that is, again, that just sums you up. You're just a great person, but there we go. Alex, from your point of view, again, I guess it's 2 levels, isn't it? You've got the student level, then you have your peer group that, whereas I guess feedback would be easily forthcoming, shall we say. But how do you actively listen to your diverse audiences, and have you evolved your content and your material through, or even your actually, because has it gone on to enhance your doctorates, for example, through engaging with other people?
Yeah, absolutely. Something that really resonated me from what Sarah and yourself were saying there was that idea of non-verbal cues. And if you are speaking publicly in front of a large group, then the type of listening that you have to do in the moment is very, very much with your eyes and that sense of the energy in the room. It can't be kind of, I'm just going to stop here and throw it out. How am I doing? Because it just doesn't work like that.
Be good if it did.
Yeah, no, it'd be much more helpful for us, wouldn't it? And it's very difficult, and it's one of the reasons that there hasn't been much research with regards to masculinity and educational inequality with young men is notoriously young men are not very adept or well practiced in speaking about things that might be challenging kind of emotionally, don't necessarily have the opportunity to develop the emotional bandwidth because of social pressures and things goes on in peer groups when displaying certain types of emotion. So whilst you can speak publicly to a diverse audience and hope that you've got that interest, that you've developed that authenticity, a lot of the young people that we work with, we're not going to be able to communicate meaningfully until that trust has been built and that time has been taken, which isn't standing up in front of them once. It's multiple engagements over the course of an academic year where they get to know what my dog's called and where I live, and I get to ask them about the computer game that they're playing and all of those different types of things. But I think one of the other bits of active listening, alongside the kind of feedback that you might get immediately from young people or colleagues in a conference setting, is if you're sharing the types of things that can be, and it's something you touched on, Nick, born out of personal and lived experience, then a process of listening to yourself and being very, very careful about trauma that you're sharing and how. I'm very, very well practiced in talking about that type of thing to young people. However, I was at a conference year before last, I think, which was a charity for young carers, and I didn't realise until pretty much a couple of weeks before that conference that my circumstances meant that I was a young carer. I was sat on a panel in front of about 200 people in the room, and my stomach fell through my feet, and it took me a couple of days to recover from sharing in that context, and it was different because actually I hadn't processed a lot of the things necessarily that I was talking about, and because I was speaking to peers rather than young people, then it didn't feel like I had a stronger sense of the why behind it. And a lot of the time that sense of purpose is something that I guess I've mobilized as a justification or a means by which I give myself some emotional and psychological protection.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Alex. I guess when we're talking about kind of different tools, we're very much talking about being in front of a room at the moment. We're talking about the stage. We're talking about being in front of an audience of people. There are lots of different channels, lots of different ways to reach people. very much now very often built with accessibility and inclusion built in. Are there any kind of parts of what you do which maybe don't apply or don't work as well or cannot be safeguarded over certain channels? For example, and I've changed the question slightly so for the benefit of the audience, speakers haven't been lined up for this one because of the way this conversation's going. For example, through COVID in lockdown, I tried running Find Your Voice through a Zoom call very much like this, and I stopped it very quickly because actually you're encouraging people to open up, and we're not always lucky enough to live in a safe place, let alone a happy place. It couldn't be safeguarded in the way that it could be, so I stopped very, very quickly, but I learned what channels work for what things. Of the work that you both do, are there certain channels which maybe are more effective or less effective, shall we say? Sarah, if we can go with you first, please.
Sure. Yeah, I always love in person because, again, you don't know what's going on behind people's screens. And I'm always like engaging. I do this in life as well from, young age. I remember being in the class going, he's not okay. She doesn't feel good. And probably too much so that it was, worried about other people more than myself. But for me, yeah, I'll what I'll sometimes do after the conference, especially if it's a smaller one, is I make myself there for the day. So when I'm hired, I'm there for the day so that people always say, if you see me, you can come up to me and just ask me talk to me mental. I always say I'm not a therapist, but if you want to talk to me about anything mental, physical, whatever it is, I'm here for you. And what I also do in my talks is remind people that everybody, these are normal experiences. If you're feeling low, if you feel like really low self-esteem, whatever it is, because the society doesn't talk about it, does it? We're on social media where we portray our best. We live in a small talk world where nobody talks about anything deeper. I can't stand small talk. I always say I'm allergic to it. And when, you witness people, I was at a conference last week and I knew one was going through a divorce. One had just been signed up for anxiety. And these two people, how are you? Good. Yeah. How are you? Good. And they both walk away. The problem is, let's call them Bill and Sally. Bill thinks like it's worse because he goes, oh God, everybody's doing good with me. Sally's thinking the same thing. And it's like, if we could just be a little bit more honest with each other. And people always say to me afterwards, well, what's one thing to lead with when he says, how are you? I remember doing this once in lockdown when it was in a small talk queue of, lining up for dropping my kid off at a nursery. And I just said, stressed is always or just going, ugh, is a good lead. Don't fill it with, I'm good. I remember once saying to this lady, now she's one of my best friends. I didn't even know her. She said, so how are you? How's pandemic doing? I went, I don't think I'm doing very well. And I just said that. And we joke now, I wasn't even feeling that bad in the moment. I was just so sick of saying, yeah, I'm good. And I think that masking element, isn't it? Let's just not say it. It just gets really boring as well to just keep saying, yeah, I'm good. Yeah, good. I'm fine. It's like, say something more interesting. So again, it's just saying it's okay, to say you've all got that, negative Nelly or bitchy Betty, whatever you want to call it in your head, saying you're not good enough. And when you say that enough on stage, people go, oh, thank God, it's not just me.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, another great shout out for vulnerability. Like I said, in being able to be authentic in its truest sense, actually, without the kind of the filter added. Thank you, Sarah. Alex, I think there's something that I used to do pre-pandemic, and I want to kick this off again, where I used to do a stadium tour of all the football grounds, professional football grounds in the UK, delivering a mental health talk to people that don't tend to have access to this stuff. So the average person on the terrace doesn't belong to a big organization that can pay for people to be there. Very much in terms of what you do, you're bringing things to people that wouldn't have access to this otherwise. So aside from the things that we should all do, for example, this will go out on recording, audio, video, subtitles, all the great stuff that we can do to make it fully inclusive. What things do you have to keep in mind when you are bringing communication to your audiences with that in mind? They're maybe not used to these kind of things. What kind of feeling does that generate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got legal obligations a lot of the time that are, aligned with safeguarding of young people who are vulnerable. Quite a lot of the time, the young people might have been excluded from mainstream education and are in alternative provision, might have a range of additional needs with regards to social and emotional health or neurodivergence. So we just try to incorporate in wherever we can, firstly, spaces that are outside of that environment, if they need to take a break, if they need some kind of closer accompaniment by a trained professional staff member, then we do that as much as possible and make our sessions as flexible as possible. Everything that we run is voluntary. There is no requirement or expectation for any of the young people that we engage with to undertake anything that we are asking, unless they want to, and they've opted into that process themselves. Even signing up for the workshops that we run as a university, it's individual and it's voluntary, because them wanting to be there is so important for us. Where it looks a little bit different, I've found, is YouTube and online content and engagement through that. I remember a video, because I've got a small YouTube channel, but one of the more viewed videos is about the difference between A levels and BTECs. And actually, if you're studying a BTEC qualification, it's a lot more tricky to get to university, and universities aren't always terribly good about being very, very transparent with their entry requirements. And just the freedom in the comments that came with the young people properly expressing how they felt to be studying a BTEC, but also some of the arguments that broke out in the comments that I just couldn't control and had to see. The number of comments that I had telling me I should blink more often and I would win a staring contest was quite unreal as well. But again, it's just a different space where the accessibility may actually be far higher in terms of the footprint and the reach of your audience. But when it comes to those safeguards and controllables that you might have in place in one-to-one settings, then it does become much harder to navigate and negotiate.
Thank you. Sadly, we need to come to the end of this, but come back to the room for any questions we have for the live audience today. I say sadly to have a couple more points to cover, but that being said, we could probably talk for a lot longer, to be fair. So I reckon a part 2 will come up very soon. Just keep your eyes peeled on that one. But before we go, any quick fire parting wisdom for anybody here who's looking to set out engaging diverse audiences? Sarah, what's your one tip that you'd like to offer people? And then to Alex, please.
Tip to the people in the room,
yes,
in the
please,
Zoom, or whoever's listening.
Or on the recording.
Yeah, I just think, go with your gut and what, that why. If in a split second, if you could make a difference in this world, what would it be? We've all got this inner thing within us that we want to get out there in our own way. So just for a moment, if you need to, body, breath, brain, close your eyes, just think about it just for a split second, not too long. What's one way that I could use my own authentic way to reach people to make a shift for the better in the world?
Love that. Thank you, Sarah. And Alex, please.
Always actively reflect on why the people that you may be engaging with should care about what you're saying, and what legitimacy you bring in the space to be able to share the messages that you may wish to share.
Absolutely. Thank you. From my perspective, I think the first thing to achieve in the first 10 seconds of any communication with an audience are commonality and community. Why are you like me? Why should I listen to you? And what's in it for you as well? Because you could be the most exciting person on the planet, but after a while, they're going to wonder what's in it for them. So if we can address that right from the start, that's a really good thing to do. So a big thank you to Sarah and Alex for being here today. Amazing stuff. Thank you. So we're going to come back to the room for any questions from our live audience now, but if you want to reach any of us, it's team@forgingpeople.com. Your questions are completely confidential and they will reach the right person that you address that to. I'll also send through the handout, the recording, and the contact for Sarah and Alex as well tomorrow within the next 24 hours. If you want to join us on Monday for our next free-to-access Balancing Acts episode, especially if you're looking to become a speaker or a professional communicator, crafting your brand as a public speaker with Jack, the amazing videographer, and Marcus, they're both my entourage. They're an amazing crew, and they follow me around everywhere. They know all the tips and tricks and everything else about putting your brand together as a public speaker. Free to attend, completely free to attend, midday on Monday. If you want to come along, please do. And finally, if you want to reach out to myself, it's nick@nickelston.com. Again, completely confidential, just me and you. LinkedIn and YouTube. YouTube is where the video will be hosted. My website has lots of different signposting things too. And the podcast, the imaginatively titled Nick Elston Show, that's also got about 7-8 seasons on there now as well. So I'm going to come back to the room now for any live questions. Let me just stop the recording for you a second. But thank you very much for joining us today.